So first, let's see people who try to hint that this is perhaps due to better optimization, right? So what is the optimization problem that we're trying to solve? This is the optimization problem. We are trying to reduce the mean square error. So what is the optimization problem that we're trying to solve? This is the optimization problem. We are trying to reduce the mean square error, cost interval loss, whatever on the training data, right? Is it the case that in the absence of unsupervised pre-training, this problem itself is hard? You cannot really reduce L theta to 0, but now once you do unsupervised pre-training, L theta is able to reduce to 0. Hence, earlier you had poor optimization, but now you have better optimization, right? So let us see this, right? So the error surface, as I said, for a deep neural network is highly non-convex, right? It has these many plateaus, many valleys, some very steep points where you go in and then it's very hard to come out and so on, right? And somewhere there would be multiple minima, then possibly one global minima and so on, right? Or multiple equal minima and so on. It's like a highly complex non-convex surface as opposed to a nice convex surface which just have one minima, right? So given the large capacity of deep neural networks, it is still easy to land in one of these zero error regions, right? So there might be these multiple zero error regions. Of course, in this diagram there is only one visible, but there are a few behind which are all at a zero error level, right? So given this large capacity, it's still possible to land in these zero error regions. And why am I saying that? Which theorem am I using while saying this? The universal approximation theorem, right? It said that you could construct a sufficiently large neural network to get an arbitrary degree of precision. That means you could get an arbitrary degree of low error, and in particular you could drive the error to 0 by just having a large number of neurons in your deep neural network. So I know that despite this non-convex surface, highly complex surface, I can still drive the training error to 0, right? So maybe optimization was not a problem as long as the deep neural network has a large capacity, right? Of course, the universal approximation theorem, it talks about large capacity in the term of really large, right? I mean, you're talking about exponential number of neurons, but maybe even not going to the exponential level, with sufficiently large capacity which is reasonable, I could still drive the training error to 0. So then someone did experiments to prove that whether this is indeed the case, right? So what they did is they took a deep neural network and they increased the capacity of the last layer, right? So just before the prediction, they increase the capacity. What does that mean? You add large number of weights in the last layer. How do you do that? You add a large number of neurons in the layer before it, and now from this large number of neurons, you're trying to predict one output. So you have many weights here, right? So for example, I could have, say, a network which has, say, some, let's say 100 input neurons. Then I have a few layers which have 20 neurons, right? Then I have the last layer, maybe it has 100 neurons or even more than that, right? So now I have a lot of weights here, right? I have 20 into 100 weights here, right? So the capacity in the last layer has increased, and from this last layer I'm going to again predict, say, 10 outputs, right? So then I again have 100 into 10 weights there. Now if I increase this 100 to 1000, then my capacity increases further, right? So I can just increase the number of neurons in the last layer, and that would result in an increase in the number of weights associated with that layer, right? And hence your neural network would become large capacity. So that's exactly what they did, and they showed that if you do this, then you're able to drive the error to 0 even without training, right? So what are they saying? That if you have large capacity, then you don't need pre-training, right? But large capacity, of course, comes at a cost, right? Your network becomes large, then training it takes more time and so on. So maybe when you are not able to construct large capacity neural networks, in that case, pre-training is useful, right? So that's what they showed, that if you don't have large capacity in the neural network, then pre-training is still becoming useful, right? So what is it that they're saying in effect? That we always knew that in deep neural networks, you can drive the error to 0 because the universal approximation theorem says that. But the hidden catch there was that you're talking about really large neural networks who can do that. So what these guys showed us, that is indeed the case. If you have a large neural network, even without pre-training, you can drive the error to 0. But when you have smaller capacity networks, they are not able to drive the error to 0. That means they find it hard to solve the optimization problem itself. And then if you add pre-training, then they are able to drive the error to 0. That means pre-training is leading to better optimization, right? So that's the argument that they made. Of course, this is empirical. And these experiments maybe were much smaller scale as compared to what we see in deep learning today. But that's not the point, right? I mean, a lot of these were initial days and people were still figuring out what to do, but it led to this important insight that perhaps it is helping in optimization, and if you can improve the optimization, then you can train large neural networks. So hey, let's focus on designing better and better methods of optimization. Unsupervised pre-training is one such method, but what are the other possibilities there? Now let's look at the other view here, right? Sorry, this should have been generalization. We already saw it should have been regularization, right? So is it because of better regularization? Some people try to argue that too, and let's see what that argument was, right? So what does regularization actually do? It constrains the weights to lie within certain regions of the parameter space, right? We saw this when we were doing L2 regularization, that it constrains the weights to lie in some circle, right? Because you are not allowing the magnitude to grow beyond that. That means only those weight configurations which lie on this circle are possible, or within that are possible. You cannot go outside that boundary. Similarly, L1 regularization restricts you within this diamond that you see there, right? And we even saw with early stopping, that is the effect that you don't allow your weights to grow too much, right? So you are constraining the weights to lie in certain regions of the parameter space, right? That's one way of saying it, right? Instead of saying lying in a small region or something, it constrains it to lie in certain regions, right? Now, is the same happening in the case of unsupervised pre-training, right? Indeed, unsupervised pre-training is also causing the weights to lie in certain regions of the parameter space. What are these weights? So these are the weights, or these are the regions where the weights are better able to capture the characteristics of the input data. Why am I saying that? Because where did you start with? You started with this unsupervised objective. You said that forget about my main loss function which depends on y. First, for every layer, I want to solve this unsupervised objective. The moment you do that, for every layer, you are putting the weights in certain region of the parameter space where this objective is getting minimized, right? So this is the entire, say, weight space. Now you have gone to some region there where this weights, this objective is getting minimized. Once you have minimized this omega theta, then you are throwing in L theta, right? But you are starting from the weight initialization here itself. Now this entire space is not available to you at all, right? And now once you start optimizing L theta from there, you will be moving from this region, right? So again, you will be constrained to region around that. Of course, you may move out of that region, right? But you have done the initialization in a certain region, and now from there on, if you train, you're going to move, wherever you move is going to be governed by where you restricted your initial weights to be, right? So that in that sense is acting like a regularizer. And in fact, even if you look at the regularization, the way we studied is that there's an L theta and an omega theta. The same thing is happening here, right? You first had an omega theta, you said I want to minimize that, and then I'll throw in L theta, and then I'll try to minimize L theta. So in the case of regularization, we were seeing that we wanted to minimize the loss function as L theta plus omega theta, right? This is what our regularized loss function was. I am doing something similar here. It's just that I am doing it sequentially. I am first minimizing omega theta, and then I am minimizing L theta. So in this view, it is acting as a regularizer, right? And it also matches this other view that you're kind of constraining the weights in a certain region, and then that will govern how your optimization is going ahead, right? So in L2, you had a certain way of doing that constraining the weights to a certain region. In early stopping, you had a certain way of doing that. Here also, you have a certain way that you first train that I want these individual layers to learn well. Wherever you end up, now from there start optimizing for the main problem, which is L theta, right? So that has the same effect. So if you look at this view, then it's actually acting as a regularizer, right? So both things could be possible, right? And some other experiments have also shown that pre-training is more robust to random initializations. What does that mean? So this is what it means, right? So they trained deep neural networks. Let's focus on this plot first, maybe on this plot first, with different number of layers, right? So I have a deep neural network which has some W capital parameters, like some large number of parameters, and I initialize these parameters randomly and train the network once, right? And then I got certain loss. I note what that loss is, L1, or the error, which is L1. Then I again initialized the weights, again trained the network, again noted the loss, right? So I did this some 100 times, and then I am computing the variance. Actually, I have plotted the box plot, so which tells me the variance, which among other things tells me the variance. And they're saying that for shallow networks, this variance is not very large, right? But when you have a deep neural network, every time you do a different regularization, a different initialization, and then you compute the loss, then my loss varies a lot across these different initializations. What does that mean? That these networks are not robust to initialization. It is very specific to what initialization I have done. But now, if I throw in unsupervised pre-training and then I do the same thing, now again I have first unsupervised pre-trained the weights, so I'll just call them WU, right? And now I am doing this experiment 100 times. So what am I doing that? That I have started with some W, random initialization, okay? So this is one experiment. I end up with some WU after pre-training, right? And then I compute my final loss, okay? Then I took W2, which is a different initialization, again got a different WU maybe, right? And then I computed L2. And this way I did this L100 times. So again I am doing different weight initializations, but I am passing through an intermediate layer of unsupervised pre-training. Now if I look at the variance in these quantities, then even for deep neural networks, it's actually quite low, right? So it's kind of making it more robust to random initializations, right? So now this led to the idea that maybe the old deep neural networks are sensitive to initialization. So now can we come up with better methods of initialization? So that sparked interest in that. The conclusions of these experiments are not as important as the research directions that they led to, right? So this now, when I look at this, I feel, hey, maybe initialization is an important thing and I should try to come up with better initialization methods. And people did that and came up with better initialization methods. And now that started making training deep neural networks even better, right? So what happened roughly is this, right? So if I were to summarize this period between 2006 to 2009, right? People thought that, okay, first was that unsupervised pre-training works, right? People did really completely understand why does it work. But people started investigating it through different lenses. One set of people analyzed it through the lens of optimization. Is it leading to better optimization? It led to some conclusive, non-conclusive answers, but it did seem like maybe it's leading to better optimization. Similarly, people started looking at it through the lens of regularization and thought, oh, looks like regularization is what it is doing. People looked at it from the lens of initialization and thought, hey, maybe it leads to better initialization, right? And then these lens became important, that, oh, all of this seemed to be important, so why let me focus on better initialization methods, better regularization, better optimization methods, and so on. And that is what has happened, right? Deep learning has evolved since 2009. People came up with better optimization algorithms and we saw a series of those. People came up with better regularization methods and we saw a series of those. Some was already existing, L2, L1, all of that was existing. Early stopping also to an extent, but it got popularized in deep learning. And then dropout was something which just specifically came in the context of deep learning, right? And now today we are going to talk about activation functions. Maybe activations, if I change, then maybe perhaps something could happen, and better weight initialization strategies, because some of these studies also saw that maybe initialization is what it is doing, right? So that's the context of this lecture, or the context of the past two lectures also, right, where we looked at a series of optimization methods, regularization methods. So now you know that why we were studying that, right? Because of this spark that happened in 2006 and that led to some investigations and pointed out in this direction that, hey, let's focus on these 4 areas and then maybe we'll be able to better train the deep neural networks, right? So today we are going to focus on these 2 parts, activation functions and weight initialization strategies. So I'll end this video here and we'll then start the discussion on activation functions.